Hello everyone, welcome back to Scary Spaghetti Development Blog number 3. So I'm going to give you a little bit of some updates on the game I'm developing and also just a couple other quick announcements concerning the game. Now first, I had hoped to have a Kickstarter by this month. Obviously that's not going to happen. Then I decided, well, maybe by August. Not sure if I'm going to make that either, so hoping sometime this fall, but definitely we'll get that Kickstarter up before the end of the year. And the reason I've delayed things a little bit is because I am going to be doing some reworking on the system. Because as I mentioned in the last blog, I do have a test campaign that I'm running, so haven't had a lot of playtesters so far, but I have actually gotten some helpful feedback, and some of that feedback did lead me to decide to revamp the character generation system a bit. Originally, the system was more of like a class-based system, so very much along the lines of like basic D&D. You know, back in the days of basic D&D, you know, you chose your class, cleric, elf, thief, wizard or magic user, fighter, dwarf or halfling, and you pretty much had just those abilities with very little actual crunch behind that. So you didn't really have a lot of character customization options. So that's what the original version of the game was like. It was very much a, like I said, more along the lines of old school D&D. Yeah, some of your character classes had a couple of options, but there wasn't really a lot. Then I revamped the system a little bit and introduced something called builds. So what you would do is you would choose your, well, the classes in this system are called cliques. And I do apologize if I repeat anything that I covered in my last 2 blogs. A lot of times these are just off the cuff, so it's quite possible I might repeat something that you already have heard. But anyways, so like I said, I revamped the system and did something called builds. So you would choose your clique, and then some of the, well, actually most of the cliques would have some options. Usually anywhere from 2 to 4 of these build options, though there were a couple of cliques that didn't have options, mainly because I couldn't really think of much to, you know, really make it worthwhile. Like, for example, the jock, in the original version, you could choose to specialize in either physical fitness or teamwork. But what I did for the second revision is I introduced 4 different builds for the jock, where you could be the athlete, where you don't really get any combat bonuses, but you're actually in really good shape. The other option was the captain, and this would be, you know, someone who does a lot of team sports, like football or soccer or basketball, where you need to work with your other members. Then the other 2 new builds that I introduced were the brawler, which would be someone that did a lot of martial arts. Actually, I think I had 5 in there. I may have did a grappler one as well. So that would be someone who does wrestling. And then I introduced another one called fighter, which was your, you know, your basic, like maybe you were on the fencing team or you studied a weapon-based martial art like Eskrima or Kendo. So I did that for my first 3 playtesting sessions, but like I said, due to some feedback, I decided to, first of all, add a new clique. And then also, I'm revamping it where first, each clique is going to get a perk. So this is a unique ability that is common to all members of that particular clique. For example, the jock gets one called Athletic Prowess, where they may re-roll a failed physical skill check once per mission. So like the example I give is, let's say you're climbing a tree and the game master asks the player to make an agility check and you fail. Thanks to your athletic prowess, you can make a second check in order to try to grab a branch at the last minute and save yourself from falling. Now, the way that the new system is going to be working is each click is still going to have that unique perk, but in order to introduce a bit more flexibility, there's going to be a system of traits and drawbacks, with each trait and drawback having a numeric value. So it's going to be worth a certain number of points. And you can select up to 5 points, but it has to balance out. So let's say you choose a 3-point trait for your character. And again, traits are going to be like a strong point, a special ability that your character class gets. But that means you would have to balance it out with either a 3-point drawback, 3 1-point drawbacks, or a 2-point and a 1-point drawback. So again, it's going to get, one of the reasons I actually warmed up to that idea is it does give a bit more character customization, but since you can't have a character that has all of the traits and all the drawbacks, it gives a little bit more replayability value, I guess you could say. Now, of course, I'm not saying that, if I kept one of the older systems, it wouldn't have any replayability. I mean, think of Dungeons and Dragons. Obviously, like a fighter, there's a lot of ways you can play a fighter. You could choose to specialize in two-handed weapons, or if your fighter has better dex than strength, you could choose to specialize in bows or crossbows, or maybe you might choose to be more of a lightly armed and armored fighter like a swashbuckler. So that's one of the things I did like about the second edition complete handbooks is they did give you those options where, yeah, you could play a fighter several times, but it gave you lots of different ways that you could choose to play a fighter and have something different other than your stats and your personality. Because, don't get me wrong, I do understand that some people don't like overly crunchy systems, and I'm not a huge fan of it too much crunch. I guess and I'm not really a rules light guy either. I've never really designed a rules light system. At least, well, I suppose my Action Planet can be considered rules light. That was a pretty simplistic system, but like I said, I haven't really done a lot of playing in those types of systems, so I don't consider myself an expert on them. I'm just more used to the class-based systems. But I hope these new revisions will make the system not only more flexible, more customizable, but most importantly, more enjoyable for the players. Now, I did add another click. Now, the original version of the game had a total of 7 clicks: Jock, Occultist, New Ager, Preppy, Student, Scout, and Rebel. But one of the people who was playtesting was like, well, what if I want to play something like a theater nerd or a band geek? Now, I suppose you could do something like that because any character can pick up musical or acting skills, but you didn't really have any way to specialize in it. So I did add a new click called the Entertainer. And this could easily be your theater nerd or your band geek, but it could also represent a student who studies dance or who does visual or other performing arts. So I didn't add that and actually spent a lot of time today working on that new one just to try to get some new ideas. So it was a bit more challenging than I thought, but I think I do have some good ideas to go with that new click. Not sure if I'm going to add any others. Actually, there were a couple ideas that I had from one of my play testers, like a student activist or another one like the exchange student, which, yeah, they might be some interesting ideas in there, but just right now I couldn't really think of anything to really make those viable, playable characters. Or at least I'm not sure if there's anything you can do with those particular stereotypes that you couldn't do with, a little bit of creativity with the other ones. And I remember one person I was talking to in the local gaming group that I'm a part of. Well, not really a group. It's called Appleton Area Adventures and Role Players Guild. It's more of a group designed to help people find other people to game with. And there was one person I was talking to from the group who's like, well, maybe you could also introduce a click for like special needs student. It could be someone who's like, autistic or mentally challenged. And when I heard that, I'm like, no, just no. I didn't say it to the guy, of course, but I'm like, no, that would be, personally, I think that would be a little insensitive and just, yeah, no, I wasn't going to do something like that. But anyways, so that's the state of where I am in developing the game. Now, as far as my test campaign, I have actually done a couple sessions since my last development blog episode. I did want to share something that happened during one of our testing sessions that I actually thought was funny and actually pretty awesome, really. Three of the people who were playtesting are artists that I'm working with to get artwork for the game. And the second session, I had two of those artists there. So the way the campaign is unfolding, you may recall during our first session, the characters went into an abandoned mental asylum on a dare in order to take a selfie in the morgue. And that's when they came across a group of heavily armed men and armored men with assault rifles. And they, just kind of remembered waking up in their bedrooms the next day. Well, in the second session, they went to an abandoned section of the shopping mall. Now, this is another one of those examples where I'm drawing upon real-life events for a little bit of inspiration in the campaign. Now, in this case, one of our local shopping malls, the Sears store, actually closed last year. So that section of the mall is, that store is boarded up. So far, they haven't, announced anything for, who might be buying that store location. But right now, it's just sitting abandoned. So in our second playtesting session, the players heard about there was some graffiti at the mall, as well as a strange guy who was, walking around talking about how he is coming and saying, unusual and cryptic things. And one of the symbols that was spray painted on the side of the mall, again by this abandoned store, was a symbol that they saw in their dreams. So they went to investigate, and they snuck into the abandoned part of the mall. And while they were sneaking around in the abandoned store, they did find an area where it looked like some sort of ritual had taken place. And they were attacked by this spider-like thing. So, okay, to get into my point about why this is relevant to the artists that are doing playtesting with me, I was trying to describe what this spider-like creature looked like, and both of the artists, without saying a word, took out their sketch pads and started to draw what they thought the thing I was describing would look like. So I just thought that was cool that, again, both of them, without saying anything to each other, tried drawing it. So they actually came up with some cool ideas. So probably be incorporating that eventually. But anyways, they also are investigating a missing girl, one of their missing classmates. So anyways, after defeating the spider monster creature thing, they were searching the area and they found the wallet of the missing classmate of theirs. Now, they just eventually decided that it probably would be best to just anonymously turn it into the authorities. So in the third session, that got resolved. The police went in, they investigated it, and reported that they found nothing there. So they went back to explore the store again, and when they got back to the part where they fought that spider monster, they found it had been entirely cleaned up. The carpet that had this symbol painted on it was actually removed and replaced. So again, they kind of had this, they're under this suspicion that something is going on. Also, in the second session, when they were sneaking around in the abandoned store, they were interrupted by the mayor giving a tour to some CEOs from a chain store called Value Island, which is going to be this game world's equivalent to Walmart. And they were talking about buying that particular location. So will this come into play later on? My players are going to find out. So, like I said, I've been trying to introduce some things that are going to be relevant later on, and I'm also introducing some things that maybe might not have any bearing in the long run. But anyways, what happened is when the players went back to investigate the abandoned store, they were kidnapped by a group of mysterious individuals who seemed to have some sort of magical or psychic powers. And they woke up in an underground complex, or at least they think it was an underground complex because there were no windows. Well, anyways, while they were in this complex, they discovered their missing classmate's backpack. They also fought encountered a couple of more of these spider monsters. And when they were trying to leave, they were attacked by these spider monsters again. But another group of these armored men with the assault rifles came in and saved them. And again, they ended up waking up the next day. No memory of how they got home. So eventually during the game, they will discover who exactly these men with the body armor, and again, their faces are concealed so they can't even see their faces. But they are going to find out more about them. The only clue they have to go on is they did notice that one of them has a symbol on their armor. It's the Omega symbol with a 9 in it. So that will be relevant to the plot of the game later on. So that is how the campaign's going. My next session, they're going to actually advance. So they're going to be going from rank 1 to rank 2, which basically means their characters are going from being 13-year-olds to 14-year-olds. So again, I may have mentioned this in the last session, but one of the things I'm finding is being challenging about developing adventures for this game is the pacing is definitely very different than any D&D or any other like Marvel superheroes game I ran, because usually there might be only a day or two between adventures, between missions, at least in game time. But again, since here we have to understand that each level is a year of the character's life, you gotta really think about how many adventures you want to take them on before they start leveling up. Also, they've done a bit more combat than I probably would recommend early on in this campaign. Because again, remember, right now their characters are just 13-year-olds. So, they're probably not reacting, or at least my character that I've been playing, I know, hasn't always been reacting the way I probably would have when I was 13 years old. So that's one thing I've been trying to keep in mind while designing these adventures is, okay, would it make sense for a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old to find themselves in this position? And how would I have reacted back then when I was that age? Now, I think it changes a bit once your characters get to rank 4 and they're 16 years old, because that's going to put a different spin on the campaign, because right now my players are pretty much limited to, exploring areas that are within walking or biking distance or places that they can take a bus to. But of course, once they get access to a car, it's going to be like Final Fantasy 15, where they'll be able to, explore far and wide. And that's going to definitely put a whole new spin on the focus and the locations explored in the campaign. Well, that's my update right now for the development of Scary Spaghetti. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep Scary Spaghetti as the final name. I have a couple of ideas of names I might change it to, but tell me what you think. You can certainly post to the Point of Insanity Game Studio Facebook page, or you can contact me through Twitter or poigamestudio.gmail.com. What do you think of the name Scary Spaghetti? Again, it's supposed to be a play on the term creepypasta. And that's actually what the game is going to focus on. Again, I'm trying to make, I think I mentioned this last time, I'm trying not to make it too similar to Stranger Things, because I'm just afraid that people are going to, they're just going to think it's a Stranger Things ripoff. And I know there have been other game companies that have jumped on that Stranger Thing bandwagon, and they have been making role-playing games that are essentially based in the 80s, where you play a bunch of teenagers. So again, while there might be some parallels between Scary Spaghetti and those games, I'm trying to, again, avoid being a ripoff of of Stranger Things. Again, I don't want to draw too much inspiration from that particular series, even though I actually really like it. Because actually, again, just to give you a little bit more inside baseball here, I actually started developing this game back in, I'm wanting to say 2010, 2011. That's when I actually started to come up with the ideas for the different character classes, and I decided that I wanted to do a high school themed role-playing game. However, the original version would have had more of a sci-fi influence to it. So in this case, your characters were going to be high school students that seemed to be the only ones that were aware of an alien invasion. And it would have involved, trying to work against people who were possessed by these aliens and doing their bidding. But when I started to learn more about creepypastas, that's where I started to decide to revamp the system and still keep the high school theme, but again, base it more on urban legends and creepypastas as opposed to, that sci-fi theme. And I think the game's going to be better off for that in the end. Oh, yes, and one last thing. During my last session, one of my players told me about a creepypasta called Yellow Rooms, or some people call them back rooms. And I remember after I got home from that session, I watched a YouTube video on it, and I sent him a message. It's like, you realize you're giving me ideas. Are you sure you want to be doing that? So, yes, sometime during my campaign, I will be drawing influence from the Yellow Room creepypastas. So with that said, I'd like to thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, have a good evening or morning or afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are, and happy gaming.
Welcome to Bone Throwers Theater. Nah, it's not that kind of show. It's an RPG actual play podcast. My name is Jordan, and I'm joined by our fun-loving cast.
This is Aaron.
Jeff here.
Johnny is my name.
And I'm Jeremy, and what we do is dive in and play various tabletop RPG systems and games, such as Mini 6,
Fiasco,
Inspectors,
Monster of the Week,
Fate, and more.
But no matter the rule set or setting, some pretty intense storytelling hits the fan.
So whether you like epic fantasy, adventure,
Comedy,
Sci-fi,
horror,
or just horrifically bad puns,
we've got something to feast your imagination on.
listen to our full episodes and more at bonethrowerstheater.com.
and may the bones fall ever in your favor.
You have been listening to a program from the Point of Insanity Network. Visit us at poigamestudio.podbean.com for more shows. Follow us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at POI Game Studio.